Hi, this is Eric at Try Audio. In a recent video, I reviewed the Nikko STA-5010 and compared it to a Sony and a Harman Kardon receiver. That Nikko was on loan to me from a friend of mine, and I'd never listened to it before. He had also loaned me another one, this one here, the Nikko STA-8080. And before you think this is becoming the Nikko review channel, it is not. This is the last one I'll review, I swear. Since I poked fun of him and his beloved Nikkos in the last video, he now refuses to loan me anymore. In today's video, we'll compare the looks, features, and sound of the Nikko STA-8080 with the Pioneer SX-780 and the Sony STR-V4. Let's get started. The Nikko STA-8080 was sold between 1975 and 1977 and retailed for $400. As I mentioned in an earlier Nikko video, they had a very large lineup of receivers around this time. The STA-8080 was their second largest, second only to their 65-watt STA-9090. So here we have the Nikko STA-8080. First off, let's talk about the lights. It has incandescents, and they're shining up blue in this camera and nice and bright in this camera. By the way, they're not bright and it's green. So you're being misled, and what I was going to do was show this and then be like, oh, and here's what it looks like with LEDs, and put LEDs and give him some my buddy free LEDs for letting me borrow this. And then, make a smart ass comment about how he was too lazy to do it. But I went to do it, and we'll look at it later when I get the case off. It was gonna be a pain in the butt. So we're gonna keep these incandescents in here, and it's actually nice that they're shining up bright and blue. So he does have this scratch right here. I'm gonna try to get that out with some stuff I have. We'll see if it works or not. So I tried to get the scratch out, and for the most part, it worked. You can still see it right there, but it is not nearly as noticeable. And what I used is this Novus Fine Scratch Remover. I've had this for years. I've always used it on plastics on pinball machines. Thought I would try it here, and it minimal effort. All I did was rub it on, rub it off, kind of cleared it up. I mean, this isn't my receiver. I'm just doing the guy a favor, trying to get rid of his scratch. It's not like I don't have better things to do. So let's go over the features that are on here on the Nikko STA-8080. Got two nice looking meters. We got two speaker outputs. We have high and low filters. I've determined I'm going to stop pointing these out. I'll probably still point them out, but I don't know why. It's a waste of time. These are stupid. All they do is make your music sound worse by cutting off the highs and the lows. Not sure why anyone would use them. Not sure why they charged us more to have them on here. So if I wanted my music to sound worse, I'd have just bought a sound design or something. I assume it's safe to make fun of sound design. I did used to own one when I was 13. I guess if it's not, the internet will let me know. We have bass and treble controls for each channel, two tape inputs, two phono inputs, which you can't tell because the lettering is all rubbed off. Suffering from some onchyoitis. One aux, FM muting, nice display. One thing I do want to point out, see these are lit up, that's because I have it on FM. And if I turn this to AM, the tuning meter goes out. I guess AM doesn't get a tuning, it's only FM, whatever, I don't know. And then if you turn it to like phono or aux or something, those meters go out, which is kind of lame because it doesn't look near as good with this big black space on there. I don't know what they're thinking. Save some lights, whatever. Pretty sure my Sansui 6 does this exact same thing, so I always keep it on FM. But just an odd little nuance there. So I was looking at the back of this thing. I just want to point something out. aux 1 and aux 2. So there's only one aux input to select here. I know it's hard to see, but that's dubbing. That just says aux. I double checked this on the instruction manual. Phono 2, Phono 1, FM, AM. So a single aux. Yeah, aux. But on the back, two aux inputs. So I admit a lot of things get past me on these stereos, particularly things I don't care about, like aux inputs. But usually I just look the other way. Kind of like when you go to put your dirty dishes in the dishwasher and you find out that the dishes in there are clean, so you just dump your dishes in the sink and scurry away. Yeah, kind of like that. Only I didn't do that here. I decided to do the right thing and investigate and look it up. So I found the owner's manual, And the owner's manual does show aux 1 and aux 2 in the back, and it says aux 1 is high level and aux 2 is low level. No other detail given. So then I dug out this schematic, and the best I could tell is that both aux inputs come together and run into the same input called aux on the selector switch. It's just that the aux 2 has a resistor in series with it. Therefore, aux 2 is less sensitive and would require a stronger signal. So in my mind, aux 2 would be where you would input a high level signal. Well, in the owner's manual, it says aux 2 is low level. I guess because it's making it become a lower level by having the resistor in there. It's kind of the opposite of what I would think, but regardless, why was this needed? I've never seen this on another receiver ever. Of course, a while ago, I just did admit I don't pay attention to a lot of these things. This was not worth it. So this is where I would normally talk about the Pioneer and the Sony in detail, but I've already talked about them in a little bit of detail in some other videos, and I don't want to repeat myself, so I'm just going to hit the highlights. As far as the V4, it's got 2 speaker outputs, bass, treble control, loudness, 1 phono, 1 aux input. No, I'm sorry, 1 phono input, no aux input. 2 tape inputs, so anything that would go to aux is going to have to go to one of those tapes. It does have these meters, tuning meter, left power meter. This doubles as the right power meter and the signal meter based on that switch right there. I keep it on the power meters. They are kind of hard to see from far away when they're active, but it's better than nothing. On the Pioneer, we have 2 speaker outputs, bass, treble control, your typical stuff. 1 phono, 1 aux, does have an aux. 2 tape inputs, the world's smallest and loosest balance knob. It has a tuning meter, no signal meter, but 2 power meters that are beautiful. So love that. And as far as similarities or differences between the 3, they all have 2 speaker outputs. They all have 2 tape inputs. The Nikko has 2 phono inputs. These have 1. And of course, you're missing the aux input on the Sony, but what you're missing on the Nikko are power meters. Other than that, they're pretty much the same. So here we have the backs of all 3 of them. I'm going to put the weights on the screen. I believe the Sony, which is on the bottom, is probably the heaviest. They're not too far apart though, to be honest with you. In comparing speaker terminals, the Nikko has these push button ones. They're okay, not the greatest. I prefer these on the Pioneer. It has a very big opening for larger wire, the Pioneer does, especially when compared to the Sony. It's a very small opening on the Sonys. Not much else to speak of importance on the Sony or the Pioneer, but on the back of the Nikko, you have the ability to separate the preamp from the power amp. Yes, access it right there. Has the 4-channel FM that never came out. It has breakers on left and right speakers. That's nice. If you short something out accidentally, it'll protect your unit. And it has a breaker on the AC coming in. So that is nice. The Pioneer has an internal relay to protect your speakers on your outputs. The Sony does not have anything. So that is a downside to the Sony. So here we have the cases of all 3 of them. So I'm putting together this video, and I realized in this whole section, I misspeak about the words veneer and the words laminate, because my brain and my mouth are disconnected sometimes. I understand the difference between the 2, but these 2 parts of my body just want to work against each other. And I didn't say the right words on any of it. It's kind of like when you work with a woman named Jennifer, and then suddenly one day you just call her Margaret right to her face. It's like that. I'm just going to fast forward to the end. Let's just say it's all pretend wood. But this other lemon on it was bare and seeing it, this kind of not so pretty orange color. I'm not a big fan of anything else. Got wood caps on the end, so there you go. So here we have all 3 of them with the cases off. I got the Nikko on the right, the Pioneer in the middle, and the Sony on the left. The thing to point out about the Sony, it does have the biggest transformer, I can tell, and this backs up my theory that this was the heaviest. It's got pretty big filter capacitors too. So pretty beefy there, but like I said, there's no protection relay in here. And then on the Pioneer, it's a little bit smaller transformer and a little bit smaller filter capacitors, thus the less weight. There's that protection relay. So that is a nice feature. And then on the Nikko, about the same size transformer and capacitors as the Pioneer. And we talked about the breakers. That's it right there. I want to move on to the lights though. On this Nikko, I said it's still got the incandescents in here. I tried to replace it, just 2 screws to pull that piece out and get to those fuse style lights. The problem is that tuning string sits right there, and I don't want to break that thing. No one wants to break their tuning string. That's just horrible. And then there's not a lot of slack in those wires, so I couldn't get that out to access the clips. Left the incandescents in there for them. Those could have been replaced probably a little easier. Those are for the meters. But anyway, in theory, it's easy because it's the fuse style lights. Just hard to get to. 180 degrees from that is the Pioneer. Easiest lights in the world to replace. We have these that just pop right in. It's like replacing a bulb just in a lamp in your house. Awesome. And then on the Sony, we've got the fuse style on each end. And then you have some sockets here for the meters. Not too bad. It's been a while since I've done it, so maybe it was bad. Hell, I don't know. Anyway, there you have all three of them. So for this review, I started with three songs: Sick Love by Red Hot Chili Peppers, Trouble's Coming by Royal Blood, and Radar Love by Golden Earring. I quickly realized that Trouble's Coming, while a great song, is not very good for comparing stereos. It is just very bass heavy and there's not a lot in the mids. So I dropped it like I dropped my phone when the case is not on it, and ended up going with Queen's Don't Stop Me Now. Then I eventually realized that Radar Love isn't a particularly good song for comparing stereos either. There's just not a lot going on in that thing. So I ended up with Just Like Heaven by The Cure, which is a very good song for comparing stereos. There's a lot going on there. That was the one that made me hear all the differences. So let me start by saying that there are no losers here. All three of these receivers sound very good. That being said, there are differences, and I did have my own personal preferences. We're going to start with the Nikko STA-8080 and the Pioneer SX-780. The biggest difference here lies in the lows and the highs. The Nikko is very deep. Its bass is really, really good, and it has good highs. The Pioneer SX-780 has good lows and really airy, clear, detailed highs. For me, I prefer the detailed highs of the Pioneer, and the song that really did it for me was Just Like Heaven. That song starts with bass and drums, if you're familiar with it, and then guitar kicks in, and then another guitar kicks in, and then 4 bars later the keyboards kick in, and then another 4 bars later another guitar kicks in. And in the Pioneer, you can hear all of those instruments keep their own space separated from the rest of them, and you can, as the song goes on, you can hear all of them if you pay attention. In the Nikko, not so much. They all eventually kind of blend together and they take a back seat to that thumpy bass. So for that, I'm giving all three songs to the Pioneer. Next up, we have the Sony STR-V4 and the Pioneer SX-780. These two are very close. About the only difference is that the Pioneer is a little better on the highs again. It has a little better instrument separation. These two are much closer than the Pioneer was to the Nikko. And the Pioneer is not doing anything wrong and getting the highs a little better. The Sony's not doing anything wrong. It's just it's not as clear on the high end. For that reason, all three songs to the Pioneer. And finally, we have the Nikko STA-8080 and the Sony STR-V4. I would have thought going into this that there would have been a pretty big difference because the Nikko sounded pretty different from the Pioneer, and the Sony sounded pretty much like the Pioneer. But no, none of that even came out that way. These two are very close to sounding the same except for the deep bass. I'm just going to say it's probably because the mids are the same and the basses are similar, but the Nikko is a little lower and the highs are the same. So for whatever reason, they're very close, just except for that little extra low on the Nikko. And I like that extra low on all three of these songs. So all three of the songs go to the Nikko. So I always get a second opinion from my wife, Laura. She listened to them without knowing what my opinion was. When she listened to the Nikko and the Pioneer, she pretty much had the same conclusion I did. Nikko, deeper bass. Pioneer, better highs. She liked all three songs better on the Pioneer for the better instrument separation, more clear. But then when it came to the Sony and the Pioneer, she said, it's a wash. She said, they might sound a little different, but it's too close to call. They're the same. So then you would think she would prefer the Sony over the Nikko because Sony sounds the same as the Pioneer. Nope. She said that they were the same too. I shouldn't say that they sounded the same, that she didn't have a preference. that she admitted the Nikko was always deeper and lower, but it wasn't necessarily better than the Sony. So she said it was a wash. So I think her preference on all these would have been the Pioneer. So all three of these are very good receivers. They really are. Here's how I would summarize it. The Nikko has the deep bass and the Pioneer's got the clear highs, and the Sony sits in between. It's sharing some qualities with each. It has probably the same highs as the Nikko and the same lows as the Pioneer. So it's not doing anything extreme. It just kind of sits in the middle. Personally, I prefer the Pioneer SX-780. I think those clear highs give it better instrument separation than the other two, and that would be my preference. The Nikko I would give second place just because it sounds kind of the same as the Sony, except for it goes deeper. Who doesn't like deep bass? So, but that's to take nothing away from the Sony. It sounds good on its own. If you didn't compare it to these two, you would think it was a very good sounding receiver. So I want to end on value. As you can see here, the eBay sold prices of the Pioneer are going to be a little bit more than the other two. You're paying a little bit for that Pioneer name, not as much as you're paying for some names, but there still is a premium there. The upside is that there are a ton of SX-780s out there, unlike that Nikko STA-8080, which is a much rarer find. Here's how I would put it. If I could either buy that Sony STR-V4 for $300, the Nikko STA-8080 for $300, or the Pioneer SX-780 for $350, I would pay $350 for the Pioneer. I wouldn't necessarily pay $500 or $600 for it if I could get one of those other two for $300, but a $50 premium, even $100 premium, in my opinion, it is a very good receiver, and it gets you those 2 power meters the Nikko doesn't get you. So that is something. I want to thank you guys for watching. That wraps up our video. Please check out the other ones I got on the channel. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.